I arrived at Fort Myers first thing in the morning with a clear head. I was happy to be back after a month of bed rest, but the moment I stepped out of my car, I noticed the unease hanging heavy in the air before me. The entire base was filled with an emotion I couldn't place, so tangible that I could almost taste it. The hair on my neck stood, and the air felt heavy. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something felt off about this place today. Yet I pushed the feeling aside, determined to focus on my task for today. It was time to train. I strode past the entrance gates, acknowledging the desk clerk with a nod and a forced smile. His eyes flickered with surprise and concern, as if he could sense the tension radiating from me. But his eyes cooled and went back to normal. I dismissed it as my own paranoia, my mind playing tricks on me. With a final nod, I make my way past into the training grounds. The crisp morning air filled my lungs almost to breaking point with ice-cold daggers, momentarily distracting me from the unsettling atmosphere. I watched from a distance as my second led the team in drills. Immediately they spotted me though. All pretense of concentration dropped as they hollered my name. I joined them with a smile, urging them to get back to work, and soon we were in the midst of hand-to-hand combat training. Sweat trickled down my brow as I sparred, exchanging blows and defending myself against my comrades. The familiar routine helped ground me, providing a semblance of normalcy in the midst of this very off-putting day. While we lifted weights together, I caught snippets of conversation between the officers. Tanner, my second officer, spoke in hushed tones, his voice laced with skepticism.
"Did you hear about those nutcase scientists?"
he asked.
"They managed to sneak their way into a highly secure meeting with the president himself. Can you believe that?"
My heart skipped a beat. A cold shiver ran down my spine. The unease I had felt since stepping foot onto the base intensified. The president is here? I paused for a moment, pretending to adjust my gear, my mind racing with questions. What did those scientists say? Why would they risk everything to meet the president? And what does it have to do with the bizarre atmosphere enveloping the base? Celeste, a slim woman with a mischievous glint in her eyes, and a talent for handling explosives, interrupted my spiraling thoughts.
"I think they were onto something, Tanner,"
she sang, her voice sounding so sure, carrying a conviction that caught me off guard.
"No sane person would risk their heads just to prank the leaders of their country. There's gotta be something more to it."
Tanner rolled his eyes, dismissing Celeste's words as nonsense.
"Come on, Celeste. You actually believe in aliens? That's ridiculous."
I stayed silent, my heart pounding in my chest. I had no idea what to believe. There was a tightening in my heart, a mix of fear and curiosity that refused to be ignored. I had always been a skeptic at heart, and proud of it, never entertaining the notion of extraterrestrial life. But something about this situation, this strange aura surrounding the base, surrounding this entire day, gnawed at my core. Finally, Tanner turned to me, his eyes searching mine for an answer.
"Claire, do you believe in aliens?"
I paused, taking a moment to gather my thoughts. My mind swirled with conflicting emotions, uncertainty battling against a rising sense of foreboding. I met Tanner's gaze and replied softly, "I don't believe in all that nonsense. We all know the things our military is capable of. If there is anything otherworldly happening, just know the NSA must be testing something." We all laughed, but the laughter died down almost immediately. "Something feels off today, though, doesn't it?" Tanner scoffed, shaking his head dismissively.
"You're overthinking things, Claire. There's no such thing as aliens. It's just a bunch of crazies causing a stir."
Celeste's voice cut through the tension.
"Whether they're right or not, we've got a duty to protect this country. Aliens or not, real or fake, we can't afford to ignore any potential threats."
Her words lingered in the air, hitting a chord within me. Despite my skepticism, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than meets the eye. The tightening in my heart stayed put, an insistent reminder that there were unknown forces at play. Deep down, I wanted to dismiss it all as nonsense, to believe that the scientists were merely eccentric coeds with wild imaginations. But there was a part of me that wouldn't let me rest. A flicker of curiosity that refused to go dim no matter how hard I tried to suppress it. As the training session continued, I found my focus waning. Each punch and kick became mechanical, my mind preoccupied with the events unfolding around me. Tanner's skepticism clashed with Celeste's unwavering belief, and I felt caught in the middle, teetering on the edge of doubt and uncertainty. I stole a glance at the surrounding base, a place of familiarity and routine. Now it reminded me of a backdrop to a surreal drama. Soldiers moved about with a hint of tension in their steps, whisperings of conversations reaching my ears. The buzz of uncertainty and speculation grew louder, infiltrating every corner of my mind.
Okay, Claire, I've had enough of this.
Tanner approached me, his voice tinged with frustration and what sounded like anger.
Look, Claire, I know you've got a skeptical mind, but you can't let this nonsense cloud your judgment. We've got responsibilities here, and we can't waste our time entertaining wild theories. Besides, you don't need to stress too much now.
I met his gaze, not bothering to put a cap on the mixture of resolve and doubt reflected in my eyes. Tanner, I understand what you're saying, but something feels different today. The way the whole base is off-kilter. Heck, the day itself even feels wrong. The unease that lingers in the air, it can't be ignored. We owe it to ourselves and to our country to investigate, to at least consider the possibility that there might be something more to this. Tanner sighed, his frustration giving way to a hint of reluctant understanding.
All right, Claire. I'll admit, the atmosphere is unusual. But until we have concrete evidence, I don't want any talk of aliens or extraterrestrial threats. Let's focus on what we know and what we can control.
Celeste, ever the voice of dissent, interrupted him once again.
But what if they're right? What if there is an extraterrestrial threat? Ignoring it could be catastrophic.
Tanner shook his head, dismissing Celeste's concerns.
Celeste, you've always been too dramatic for your own good. We can't jump to conclusions based on speculation. Let's stick to our duties and protect this country like we always have, by not prying into matters that don't concern us.
Their exchange left me torn, caught between two contrasting perspectives. As we resumed our training, I grappled with my own uncertainty, the unanswered questions echoing in my mind. The sun reached its zenith, casting a glaring light upon the training grounds. Beads of sweat glistened on my brow, sliding so slowly down my nose that it made me itch, mirroring the internal struggle I faced. With each strike, each defensive maneuver, I spaced out, savoring the mindless exertion. As the training session drew to a close, I met Tanner's gaze once more. His skepticism remained, but there was a flicker of challenge in his eyes. Keep an open mind, Tanner, I say, my voice steady. I won't dismiss anything until we have all the facts. This may be more than just a prank or a delusion, I continued, my voice resolute. If there is even a slight chance that there is truth to the claims made by those scientists, we owe it to ourselves and to our country to investigate further. We can't afford to dismiss it without at least exploring the possibilities. Tanner's gaze softened, and he nods in reluctant agreement.
You're right, Claire. We need to objectively approach this with caution and gather information. Let's start by finding out more about those scientists, their motives, and the validity of their claims. If there's anything substantial, we'll take it from there and report back to the higher-ups.
Celeste, who had been observing our exchange, offers a small smile of approval.
I knew you'd come around, Claire. Sometimes we have to trust our instincts, even when the logic tells us otherwise.
I had just come out of the barracks, where I had a shower after the morning drills. The cool breeze brushed against my damp skin, refreshing me from the intense training session. As I walked towards the mess hall, my stomach grumbled in anticipation of lunch. The sky above me was vibrant blue, dotted with fluffy white clouds. One of them hid the sun, so there was no glare to interfere with my view. The sky was beautiful. Suddenly, a deafening bang echoed through the air, causing me to stop in my tracks. My heart raced as my head swiveled, trying to find the source of the sound, and my breath caught in my throat. I looked up, my eyes scanning the sky for any sign of what had caused the sound. Was it an explosion? A sonic boom? The uncertainty tightened my chest, and a shiver made its way down my spine. Minutes passed, but there was no immediate answer. I started to feel silly for just standing there staring at the sky. Maybe it was just a coincidence, a random occurrence. I shrugged it off and resumed my walk towards the mess hall, attempting to put the strange sound behind me. First the air feels weird and now I'm hearing things? Maybe I should have stayed home for one more week. But before I could take more than a few steps, another thunderous bang filled the air. This time, it was accompanied by a distinct whoosh of rocket jets. I froze, my eyes widening in alarm. The sound seemed to come from directly above me. It seemed to come from the entire sky. Without warning, a massive hunk of metal crashed into the ground, just a few feet in front of me, sending a shockwave through the air. The impact raised a thick cloud of dust and heat that engulfed everything, momentarily disorienting me. I stumbled backwards, shielding my face with my arms, fear coursing through my veins like thick, hot sludge. As the dust settled, I cautiously snuck out from the haze. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breaths came in shallow gasps. I inched closer to the fallen object, and my eyes widened with a mix of awe and dread. The body, the thing before me, was like nothing I had ever seen. It was sleek and angular, its surface a shiny coal black that radiated heat. Strange symbols adorned its metallic exterior, hinting at its extraterrestrial origin. The air crackled with electricity, and the distinct smell of ozone filled my nose. To my astonishment, the machine began to transform. Parts shifted and rearranged, unfolding into a humanoid form. My eyes widened as the realization hit. A robot. Something sleeker and more advanced than I had ever seen before, than any human had ever envisioned. Fear mingled with curiosity as I watched the robot take shape. Its movements were precise, almost graceful, as if guided by some unseen force. The machine towered over me, its glowing red eyes rapidly scanning the surroundings. Before I could find the words to speak, chaos erupted around me. Screams echoed through the air, and soldiers rushed out from every corner of the base. Panic and confusion spread like wildfire. The presence of robots, not just one in front of me, but so many that a hive of bees, by number, would pale in comparison, had sent shockwaves of terror through every single human being. My mind raced as I tried to process the situation. Was the robot a threat? What did it want? I glanced back at the machine, my gaze meeting its piercing red eyes. The robot seemed to emanate an air of power and menace, and my instincts screamed at me to run. I survived the first wave, and so did most of the people present in Fort Myers. For the rest of the country and the world, they unfortunately weren't so lucky. This was one of the absolutely worst times to be a human being. After a whole rampage, with millions of people dead all over the globe at the hands of genocidal alien tech, for some reason, the machines stopped. The rampaging robots just stopped and retreated into their pods. It was eerie at first. Sudden silence, whereas only moments before, the screams of dying men and the deafening screech of all the firepower the soldiers could muster was all that filled the air. But I found it was something I actually needed, because my limbs shook and I was sure I would collapse in the next few seconds. I headed to the barracks after leaving sentries from my squad to watch the obsidian pods littered all over the grounds, desperate for a chance to process what on God's green earth I had just witnessed. There had to be a logical explanation, something I was missing, but the evidence was clear. Aliens are real. The only question now is what they really want from my planet. Little did I know, I would be getting the answer sooner than I expected. None of us had even recovered from the attack yet, and some people were being treated in the base hospital, so I was understandably miffed when my superior asked the squad to fill in as a security detail for the latest presidential meeting. Still, an order is an order. The tension in the room was palpable as the president's voice boomed, echoing off the cold, sterile walls. My squad and I stood at attention, the weight of our responsibility heavy on our shoulders. I glanced at my fellow squad members, their expressions mirroring my own mix of frustration and unease. The president was engaged in a heated argument with his generals, their voices rising in a cacophony of anger and desperation. It was all too typical. The leaders always seeking the most extreme solution, nuking everyone and everything. It filled me with disgust, but I couldn't afford to let my attention waver. The president's safety was my utmost priority, even if he was so misguided that he would risk a nuclear war just so we could be rid of the robots. As the shouting continued, a sudden, piercing sound cut through the air. I instinctively reached for my earpiece, but it wasn't the usual transmission. It was something much more ominous. A message that resounded across the world, infiltrating every communication device. Suddenly, a voice boomed through every single speaker in the base, startling us all to the silence. The alien-sounding grunts somehow translated to English.
Residents of T-124, also known as Earth, your time is limited. We have seen your defensive capabilities, and they are sorely lacking. So your planet has now been claimed for the Nebulax. Surrender or face annihilation. We offer no mercy, only a swift death if you surrender.
A collective gasp filled the room, and I felt my blood turn cold. The chilling demands echoed in my ears, a stark reminder of the imminent danger we faced. The message reverberated in my mind, instilling a sense of urgency and dread.
Our entire fleet is poised for attack. That was only the first wave. You have 3 Earth days.
The sudden silence enveloped the room, leaving no room for doubt. We had to surrender willingly, or face a painful extinction. I felt a shiver run down my spine as the weight of those words sank in. Fear gripped my chest, constricting my breath. The room erupted in chaos, with panicked voices and frantic movements all around me. Generals and high-ranking officials scrambled to formulate a plan, each one more desperate than the last. General Adams, my direct superior, slammed his fist on the table.
We can't surrender! We must fight back!
General Mitchell, his voice trembling, countered.
But how, Adams? Look at that ship. It's enormous. Our current weapons are useless against it. Useless!
Adams paced back and forth, his brow furrowed.
We can't be sure. There must be something! We can't give up without a fight. We have to find a weakness. A way to bring that damn thing down!
My heart raced as I listened to their heated exchange. The situation was dire, and the weight of the world bore down on the shoulders of everyone in the room. But none more so than the president. He had a sheen of sweat coating his brow, and I had never seen the boisterous man so quiet. I took a deep breath, attempting to steady myself. Colonel Reynolds, a seasoned veteran, spoke up, his voice stern.
Perhaps we can negotiate. There must be something they want other than our destruction. We have resources, knowledge.
General Adams scoffed.
You think these creatures want anything we have to offer? You saw the attack too. They've come here to wipe us out, Reynolds! Negotiating will only delay the inevitable.
As the tension in the room escalated, I glanced around, observing the anxious expressions on everyone's faces. The weight of the decision they had to make pressed down on me like a crushing burden. General Mitchell's voice wavered as he addressed the room.
We can't ignore this warning. Surrender might be your only hope.
General Adams, his eyes blazing with defiance, shook his head.
I won't go down without a fight. We must stand our ground and defend our planet, no matter the cost!
The room erupted into another round of heated debates, each side presenting their arguments with increasing desperation. The atmosphere was suffocating, thick with the weight of impending doom. In the midst of the chaos, I found myself torn between the two opposing viewpoints. Surrender seemed like an unthinkable option, but the alternative was a painful and uncertain future. A knot formed in my stomach. They would both lead to death eventually. The panic was tangible, but amidst the turmoil I found myself watching with detached fascination. This was it. The moment when the entire fate of humanity hung in the balance. What could we do? What option did we have when certain extinction stared us right in the face? I felt defeated, ready to succumb to the overwhelming despair that threatened to consume us all. But just as I was about to give up, a voice shattered the chaos, commanding attention.
I know what to do.
The room fell into a hushed murmur as all eyes turned to the man who had spoken. I strained to listen, catching fragments of whispers. It turned out he was one of the scientists who had somehow managed to sneak into the base earlier that morning. To me, it felt like an eternity had passed since then. The president granted him permission to speak, his voice cutting through the tension. I stood silently at the back of the room, my eyes fixed on the man who had just introduced himself as Jerry Lane. He looked young, too young to hold the weight of the world on his shoulders. But there was something in his eyes, a mix of determination and desperation that sent a shiver down my spine. Jerry was explaining his credentials, his voice steady despite the urgency in his words.
I have a PhD in astrobiology from an Ivy League university,
he said.
I've worked at CERN, tracking particles and studying the mysteries of the universe. But none of that matters now. My team and I discovered an anomaly in the solar system weeks ago and had started monitoring its progress from NASA headquarters. Something unlike anything we've ever seen before. We were too late to realize the extent of danger it posed to Earth.
I watched as the room filled with tension, the generals and advisors exchanging worried glances. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, my fingers trembling, ever so slightly. The weight of the situation pressed down on me, threatening to suffocate me. If it wasn't clear before, it sure was now. The Earth, as we knew it, was doomed.
We've pulled every string we could,
Jerry continued.
We came here, begged for military assistance, hoping someone would take us seriously. But obviously we were too late, and now we're running out of time.
The room fell into a heavy silence, the air thick with uncertainty. My mind raced, thoughts crashing against each other like waves in a storm. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, but I knew it wasn't my place. My duty was to listen, to absorb every word, and do absolutely nothing unless I am ordered to. Jerry's eyes met mine for a brief moment, and I could see the weight of the world reflected in them. I wanted to reach out, to offer him some semblance of comfort, but my hands remained firmly at my sides.
I know this is a lot to take in,
Jerry said, his voice trembling ever so slightly.
But we have to act now. We can't afford to waste any more time.
I watched as the generals and advisors exchanged more hurried whispers, their faces etched with worry. I bit my lip, my heart pounding in my chest. The suspense in the room was palpable, and I couldn't help but wonder what the future held. The president deliberated with his advisors, their anxious glances exchanged in silent communication. Then the president turned to face Jerry. His voice weighted with the realization of our desperate circumstances.
Desperate times. You said you know what to do, though. What did you have in mind?
My heart skipped a beat as Jerry began to lay out his plan. His voice was steady, filled with a blend of scientific knowledge and unfaltering determination. His plan was a risky endeavor, requiring coordination between scientists and the military, but it offered a sliver of hope amidst the looming darkness. The room was silent, the weight of the decision hanging in the air. It was a bold plan, a last-ditch effort to save humanity from annihilation. The president's gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of each individual present. And then, with a resolute tone, he delivered his final sentence, a beacon of hope shining in the chaos.
Prepare for Operation Humanity. We fight for our survival.
3 hours into Operation Humanity, I was ready to quit and go home. If only I had a home to go to. Not many people had a home to go to anymore. Heck, more than half the population of the world was dead, and only after less than 30 minutes into the first wave. All those left alive, though, wished they weren't. I didn't understand the full scope of the destruction from inside the base, where we only had a few dead and many more injured from the clash. But outside, the world was a mashup of fire and chaos. Only yesterday, after the panicked meeting, so many things had happened. The president was to be returned to DC by the Air Force on that night, but for some reason he was still present at 2300 hours, and called on me specifically. While I walked to the administrative building, an earth-shaking roar, which sounded like a cross between a rocket and an active volcano, shook the earth. It was so bad that I was knocked to the ground. By the time I had gotten to my feet, the small light the moon cast was overshadowed by the sheer bulk of the structure I could clearly see from miles away. When I made my way into the conference room, I wasn't surprised to find the room in total chaos. The huge Nebulax mothership had landed in the nearby city, its colossal shape casting a dark, imposing shadow over the once lively landscape and causing the planet to fall into more chaos. The GPS satellite had confirmed its arrival, and a chill ran down my spine at the thought of what it meant. The president's voice echoed through the room as he addressed us, filled with urgency and concern. It was clear that something drastic needed to be done. His voice worried me more than anything. He looked strained and defeated, all within the space of a couple hours. But he held his head high as he spoke to me.
I'm assigning your squad to lead the team of scientists and infiltrate the mothership. We must gather as much information as we can while those Nebulax robots are still dormant in their pods, while Jerry can work on his plan to end them.
A heavy weight settled in my chest as the gravity of the mission sank in. The future of humanity rested upon our shoulders, and the burden felt too heavy. I wish I could throw it off. This was not the first time I had cursed the president and his cabinet in my mind. All they ever did was give orders for the soldiers to carry out from behind the safety of their walls, but I still understood that I had no choice. I am only a soldier, and it was my duty to obey. I looked over at my squad, a group of 10 highly skilled individuals who had trained tirelessly for this exact moment. We were the last hope. 3 scientists, handpicked from Jerry Lane's esteemed colleagues, joined us on this perilous mission, including Jerry himself. Jerry had dedicated his life to comprehending the mysteries of the world, and his expertise would undoubtedly be invaluable to navigating the treacherous terrain of the mothership. With a sense of purpose and determination, we set off to the wreckage-laden city. My heart shattered as I took in the scene that unfolded before my eyes. The once bustling streets now lay in ruins, scarred by the indestructible pods of the alien robots. Streets that I had walked down with co-workers and friends were void of any kind of life, except for Nebulax. The metallic remnants of their bodies were scattered throughout the city, in a chilling testament to the chaos they had unleashed. But the devastation wasn't solely the work of the Nebulax. With the state of emergency, opportunistic looters had seized the chance to wreak havoc, further worsening the already dire situation. Their rampage left behind a trail of destruction, adding to the overwhelming sense of desolation that permeated the air. It was a grim reminder that even in the face of impending doom, some people chose chaos over unity. If they just banded together, it was quite obvious that they would have supplies for up to a year. We pressed on, navigating the decimated streets with caution. The once colourful storefronts now lay in ruin, their shattered glass glinting in the fading sunlight. The eerie silence enveloped us, broken only by the occasional creaking of fallen debris, or the distant sound of music. As we ventured deeper into the heart of the city, signs of the Nebulax's presence became more pronounced. Strange energy signatures crackled through the air, filling the atmosphere with an otherworldly hum. It sent shivers down my spine, a reminder of the alien force that we were about to face. With each step, we encountered more of the Nebulax's dormant robots, encased in their eerie pods. They were like grotesque sculptures, frozen in time, waiting for their next command. It was a daunting sight, but it also filled me with a faint glimmer of hope. If we could gather the necessary information and find their weaknesses, we might have a chance to turn the tide. And of course, there was the other plan. While I and the team picked their way through the city, the crumbling buildings and shattered windows served as a stark reminder of the chaos that had consumed this once vibrant place. They were suddenly stopped in their tracks by a group of innocent-looking boys. They couldn't have been older than 13 or 14. Their wide eyes and tattered clothing painted a picture of innocence, lost in this unforgiving world. Their leader, a small, freckled-faced boy, with a mop of dirty blonde hair, approached meekly and tugged at the sleeve of my worn-out jacket.
"Please, ma'am,"
he pleaded, his voice trembling with desperation.
"we need your help. Our families are trapped, and there's no one else who can save them."
I glanced back at my squad, a mix of wariness and determination etched on their faces. We had been through so much together, fought off countless threats, but this was different. These boys seemed genuine, their plea for assistance echoing through the desolate streets. "Wait for me here," I instructed my team, trying to ignore the faint alarm bells ringing in the back of my head. "I'll be back as soon as I can." With a reassuring smile, I walked off with the boys, hoping that their innocence hadn't been entirely extinguished in this ravaged world. The moment I turned my back on my squad, everything changed. The air shifted, growing thick with hostility and deceit. In an instant, the boys revealed their true intentions. They lunged at me, their small frames transforming into ferocious attackers, fueled by desperation and greed. It became clear that they were nothing more than looters, preying on the kindness of others for their own gain. My heart raced, pumping adrenaline through my veins as my body reacted to the imminent threat. I dodged their initial assault, feeling the wind brush against my cheek as their fists sailed past. Time seemed to slow as I retaliated, striking out with precision and speed. My muscles tensed, my training taking over, guiding my movements with calculated efficiency. Blow after blow, I held my ground, each impact resonating through my bones. Sweat dripped down from my forehead, mixing with the dirt and grime as I fought with unwavering determination. The looters were nimble, darting and weaving with agility born of survival, but I was resolute. The desperation in their eyes fueled their aggression, but I refused to let their misplaced rage overpower me. A clash of metal against metal echoed through the deserted streets as my squad, realizing the danger, rushed to my aid. Together, we formed a formidable force, a united front against these treacherous boys. Our movements were synchronized, a well-oiled machine, compared to their clumsy attempts. A surge of adrenaline coursed through my veins as the looters began to falter. Their attacks grew sloppy, their energy waning. We pressed forward, pushing them back with relentless force. With each strike, with every grapple, we asserted our dominance, refusing to let their sloppy nonsense continue. Finally, our collective might overwhelmed them. The looters scattered, disappearing into the shadows from whence they came. We stood, triumphant yet exhausted, catching our breath as the adrenaline slowly subsided. Sweat soaked through my clothes, my body aching from the intensity of the fight. We continued our journey, though the weariness settled heavily on my shoulders. Passing by a few houses that still bore signs of life, I hoped for a glimmer of something, a flicker of light or sound, anything at all. There had to be children in a couple of these houses. They still had kids' bikes parked on their front lawns. Yet the doors remained shut, the windows locked tight, as if the fear that gripped the city had closed off even the most basic human connection. Hours turned into an eternity as we trudged through the decimated streets, finally reaching the heart of the city. We found ourselves standing before the entrance to the underground train station, the once bustling hub, now a shell of its former self. Broken machines and shattered glass surrounded us, a haunting reminder of the civilization that had crumbled before our eyes. As I stared at the wreckage, my heart weighed heavy with dread. The underground offered a glimmer of hope, a chance for escape from the desolation above. But seeing the devastation, I couldn't help but wonder if we were simply trading one nightmare for another. Would the underground be any different? Or would it be just another battleground in this relentless fight for survival? Just one day. I shook my head. Determination mingled with uncertainty as I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the increasing doubts in my head. We had come too far to turn back now. We had endured too much to let our fear dictate our path. With resolve burning within me, I turned to my team, their tired eyes reflecting the same mixture of apprehension and determination. "We press on," I said, my voice strong and unwavering. "We face whatever waits for us below, knowing that our fight is far from over." The flicker of hope still burned brightly in my heart, a beacon guiding me through the darkness of my imagination. Not for the first or last time today, I prayed my parents were all right. And so, we descended single file into the dark and damp, the weight of our packs heavy upon our shoulders. My squad and I ventured into the labyrinth subway system, our footsteps echoing through the dimly lit tunnels. As we made our way deeper, the surroundings grew darker. The faint glow of the remaining working lights offered little comfort. The occasional deserted train sat silent, their metal frames looming like ghosts in the shadows. The very air was stilted and dead, filling me with an anticipation of the unknown. A shiver ran down my spine as we continued our trek towards the spot where the Nebulax mothership had landed. The air was heavy with tension, each step taken with caution. We were aware that there were many dangers lurking in the darkness. So many things could go wrong. It could be not only the dreaded Nebulax, but also something far worse. Humans who have nothing more to lose. As we walked through what could have easily passed for a bomb shelter, with how sturdy the rock walls were, I tried to ignore the tiny echoes of our footsteps and our voices as Jerry and I fell into conversation, seeking a distraction from the rapidly increasing tension. He began discussing his plan for when we reached our destination, his voice low and thoughtful.
I had been observing the Nebulax robots during the battle, or if I want to word it better, the absolute slaughter.
He explained, wincing.
They seem to operate as a collective, controlled by a central source. When the first wave ended, their behaviour indicated that they are the baser nebulax, likely controlled by a hive mind. So, my idea is simple. Get rid of the controller, and they become mindless.
I nodded, understanding the implication of his words. So, the plan is to find a way to destroy whatever is holding the controls, I said, trying to grasp the fragility of the situation. But it's not a sure thing, is it? Jerry sighed, a pensive expression crossing his face.
No, it's far from concrete,
he admitted.
That's why we have you, Claire. That's the only reason your superiors would even consider sending you away, when the bases need as much personnel as they can get.
I could feel the heat rising in my heart as it sped up, the blood drawing from my face. He said nothing, though, staring at me without even moving until the mix of embarrassment and fear made me want to snap. I didn't reply, opting instead to redirect my attention to Tanner, who was walking in front of us. Guilt gnawed at me as I avoided Jerry for the rest of the day, lost in my thoughts and doubts. There was no way he could know, but the man was too intelligent for his own good. He must have picked up a pattern. Nevertheless, we had a job to do, whether he approved of it or not. Nightfall brought us to a dead-end tunnel, where we decided to rest and replenish our energy with rations. As we settled in, I took up the first watch, positioning myself at the edge of the group, my gaze fixated on the seemingly endless tunnels stretching out before us. My mind was a whirlwind of uncertainty. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on my shoulders. Jerry's distrust in me had both flattered and intimidated me. What if I failed? What if my decisions led us astray, or worse, to our demise? The weight of those possibilities made it difficult to focus on the task at hand. The silence of the night was broken only by the distant sounds of dripping water and the muffled breathing of my comrades. My thoughts swirled in a chaotic dance, unable to find a solid path forward. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything hinged on me, that our survival depended on my ability to rise above my doubts, to do what needed to be done. Lost in my own inner turmoil, I remained motionless, my eyes scanning the tunnels, searching for any signs of danger. The darkness seemed to stretch on endlessly, a void waiting to swallow us whole. In that moment, I understood the gravity of our mission. The fate of humanity rested on our shoulders, and I couldn't afford to let doubt cloud my judgment. As the night wore on, I continued to stare into the tunnels, my mind racing with plans and responsibilities. The weight of the world felt heavier than ever, but deep down, I knew that I had to find the strength to carry it. The future of humanity depended on it, and I wouldn't let them down. I had just managed to drift off to sleep when the scream shattered my silence. My body jerked upright in my bedroll, heart pounding. Adrenaline surged through me, and I scrambled for my weapons, hearing the others do the same. We were in a tunnel, deep beneath the surface of the earth, and the darkness closed in around us like a shroud. The tunnel was lit up by a flare, casting an eerie orange glow over everything. And what I saw made my blood run cold. It was a Nebulax robot, large and alien and powerful. It was hunched over one of my squad members, its long, spiny limbs wrapping around him like a python. The soldier screamed,
No!
and the sound sent chills down my spine. Without hesitation, we opened fire. Our weapons blazed, filling the tunnel with deafening noise and blinding flashes of light. But the robot didn't seem to notice. Its metallic skin absorbed the impact of our bullets with ease, and it continued to feed on the soldier, who was now thrashing and gasping for air. Panic surged through me. We had no training in fighting these machines, and nothing we did seemed to be working. The Nebulax was impervious to our weapons, and I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. Were we going to die down here? Trapped in this godforsaken tunnel? But then, I remembered something. A moment from my first fight with the Nebulax, when I'd given one of the machines a blow to the shin. It had buckled. It was a small victory, but it had stuck in my mind. I grabbed my switchblade and darted forward. The robot was still engrossed in feeding on the other soldier, its sharp teeth tearing into his flesh. I plunged the blade into its shin, twisting it with all my might. The robot let out a screech, and its grip on the soldier loosened. I pulled him away, dragging him to safety as my squad mates continued to pour fire into the Nebulax. Its blood was somewhat orange and gold in color, and it sizzled as it hit the ground. "So that's how you kill one of them, huh?" I muttered, half to myself. But the victory was short-lived. The Nebulax shook off our assault, rising to its full height. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. We were outmatched, outnumbered even with more numbers on our side, and outgunned. But we had a mission to complete, and we couldn't let the Nebulax win. I yelled to my squad, urging them to keep fighting. We had to work together, to find the machine's weakness and exploit it. We couldn't let our fear paralyze us, or we'd be dead in a matter of minutes. The Nebulax moved with incredible speed, its limbs whirring as it attacked us. I dodged and weaved, feeling my heart racing in my chest. My body was slick with sweat, my breath coming in ragged gasps. But we were making progress. Our weapons weren't doing much damage, but we were managing to chip away at the Nebulax's armor. Its movements became noticeably slower and its attacks less precise. And then, I saw it. A nick in its armor. A spot where the metal was weaker. I yelled to my squad, pointing it out, and we focused our fire at that spot. The Nebulax let out a final, ear-splitting screech, and then it collapsed in a heap on the ground. We stood there, panting and sweating, staring at the twisted, mangled remains of the machine. We won. For now. After we had treated our wounds, Jerry and his scientists got to work on the body while the rest of my squad packed up. We were weary, on edge, but relieved to be alive. The encounter with the Nebulax had left us shaken, our bodies bruised and battered, but we couldn't afford to stall due to our injuries. There was too much at stake. As we gathered our gear, the scent of blood and sweat still hung in the air, a constant reminder of the danger we had faced. The tunnel mouth loomed before us, its darkness seeming to swallow my hopes. We were ready for anything. Or so I thought. And then, another sound reached our ears, cutting through the tense silence. It was a faint noise, almost imperceptible at first, but it grew louder with each passing second. We scrambled for our weapons, instincts kicking in. Fear and adrenaline surged through my veins, making my heart race. I aimed my gun at the tunnel mouth, my hands trembling slightly. The others did the same, their eyes darting anxiously, searching for any sign of danger. The weight of the moment pressed upon us, the unknown lurking in the shadows. But to my relief, it was only a group of people emerging from the darkness. Men, women, and children, their faces etched with exhaustion and desperation. They stumbled forward, their clothes tattered and dirty, their bodies weak from hunger. They were looking for help, for food, for a glimmer of hope in this time of despair and anguish. I lowered my weapon, my heart softening as I looked upon their worn faces. Despite our own struggles, I couldn't turn them away. They were survivors, and in their eyes, I saw the same fear and determination that fueled our mission. I motioned for my squad to stand down, and we cautiously approached the newcomers. They were hesitant at first, wary of our presence. But as I spoke to them in a soothing voice, assuring them that we were not their enemies, their eyes filled with a flicker of hope. I attended to them myself, my hands gentle, as I offered what little supplies and provisions we could spare, not knowing how long we would need them. Their gratitude was immense, their tired smiles a proof of the power of human kindness in the face of danger. They shared their stories of survival, of loved ones they had lost, and places they had to endure already. As I listened, my heart ached for them. I knew that if we didn't succeed in our mission, if we didn't find any way to stop the Nebulax, no one would survive their wrath. These people, these innocent lives, were just a fraction of those who would fall victim to the merciless creatures that plagued our world. But I couldn't let despair and fear take everything from me. I had a duty, a responsibility to protect not only my squad but also these people who had sought refuge with us. We had to find a way to fight back, to reclaim our world from the horrors that had overtaken it. With renewed determination, I bid farewell to the survivors, their faces etched in my memory. They were a reminder of why we are on this mission, why we risk our lives to get to the mothership without detection. They reminded me why I would do anything to succeed, even if I had to nuke a whole city to make sure they were gone. I gasped at my thoughts, ignoring the worried look Celeste sent my way. I finally understood why the generals were always ready to drop a nuke. No sacrifice is too small, or too large, or too taxing or too horrible to save the world. The team and I arrived at the stretch of tunnel right under the Nebulax mothership. We were exhausted from the long journey, and this brief moment of respite, before we charge, guns blazing, was a welcome relief. As the team sat down to rest, I took the opportunity to stretch my legs, feeling the soreness dissipate as I extended my muscles. My heart raced, not just from the physical strain, but also from the weight of the mission resting heavy on my shoulders. Jerry's gaze bore into me, his eyes watching my every move like a hawk. I could feel his intensity, his suspicion, as if he were searching for any signs of weakness or doubt. Avoiding his eye contact became my instinct, as if it would shield me from his penetrating scrutiny. My body tensed in response, a subtle defensive reaction that betrayed my unease. Celeste, as usual, was in her element. She busied herself setting up the charges. The metallic clinks and clanks of the tools echoed through the tunnel, intermingling with the distant hum of the mothership's engines above. It was an eerie symphony, a cacophony of impending danger and desperate hope. The smell of oil and dampness lingered in the air, a reminder of the hidden depths that we had ventured into. I watched as Celeste meticulously positioned her explosives, her face a mask of focused wariness. Watching her work her magic was like a dance. Each movement she made seemed purposeful and deliberate. As she finished her task, she glanced up at us, her voice cutting through the tension like a sharp blade.
Get out of range!
Celeste yelled urgently. We scrambled to our feet, a surge of adrenaline propelling us forward. The ground beneath us seemed to tremble in anticipation, mirroring the turmoil within me. We raced back towards the mouth of the tunnel, our footsteps echoing loudly in the narrow space. A distant roar of the explosives being triggered pierced the air, drowning out all other sounds. A thunderous boom reverberated through the tunnel, shaking the very foundation of the earth. The cacophony of destruction enveloped us, assaulting our senses with its raw power. Dust particles danced in the air, a hazy veil that temporarily obscured our vision. As the last person, Celeste, of course, cleared out of the tunnel, I caught a glimpse of the chaos behind us. A torrent of concrete and debris crashed down, obliterating the path that we had just traversed. The force of the impact was staggering, a testament to the magnitude of our mission. I couldn't help but feel a surge of relief, that we had escaped without injuries, that we had narrowly avoided being crushed under the weight of the falling rubble. We stood there, gasping for breath, the adrenaline still coursing through our veins. The acrid smell of dust and burning remnants filled our nostrils, a sharp contrast to the sterile environment we had left behind. Sweat trickled down my forehead, mingling with the grime and dirt that coated my skin. The taste of victory, mingled with the tang of fear in my mouth. An intoxicating blend that both invigorated and unnerved me. Way to go, Celeste. Remind me never to cross you again. She grinned.
Yes, boss.
Immediately, the dust from the explosive cleared. Celeste and the team climbed through the open concrete one by one. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, propelling me forward as we pulled our comrades and the scientists with their equipment. The air was thick with tension, and the weight of our mission pressed heavily upon us. It was time, and I felt so nervous. The fate of humanity. We stood together, contemplating our next move, our gazes fixed on the hunk of otherworldly metal hanging ominously above us, the underside of the mothership. Whispers filled the air as we strategized, the sound barely audible against the backdrop of destruction. I could feel the weight of the world on my shoulders, a heavy burden that threatened to overwhelm me. Each breath I took was accompanied by a sharp pang of fear and determination. There was no turning back now. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. Operation Humanity is a go. As we deliberated, a sudden shrill beeping pierced through the silence. My heart skipped a beat, and panic surged through me like an electric shock. Time seemed to slow as my eyes darted around, searching for the source of the alarm. The beeping grew louder, drowning out all other sounds, a cacophony of danger echoing in my ears. I barked orders in horror, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and urgency. The team sprang into action, scrambling for cover as the ground beneath us quivered. The metal above our heads groaned and creaked, threatening to collapse on us. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to seek safety, but my duty kept me rooted in place. The air became suffocating, tainted with the acrid scent of burning metal. The scent mingled with the metallic tang of my fear that hung in the air. Sweat trickled down my forehead, mixing with the dust and grime that covered my face. My hands trembled, and my fingers clenched into tight fists, my body ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. With a deafening crash, a chunk of the metal broke free, hurtling towards us like a lethal projectile. Time snapped back into motion, and I reacted on pure instinct. I dived to the ground, rolling away just in time to avoid the deadly projectile. The impact shook the ground beneath me, and debris rained down, filling the air with a symphony of crashing and clanging. As the dust settled, my heart pounded in my chest, a rapid drumbeat of survival. I struggled to my feet, my muscles protesting against the exertion. But there was no time to rest. Through the haze, I saw them. The Nebulax robots, emerging from the shadows, their metallic forms gleaming with a malevolent glow. Adrenaline surged through me once more, overriding my exhaustion. I barked out commands, my voice strong, even as fear gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. The team rallied around me, their eyes mirroring my resolve. We stood together, ready to face them. All except for the scientists. They stood within our circle, tinkering with their machine. I just hoped that they would be done faster. The air hummed with the sound of machinery, the mechanical footsteps of the Nebulax robots growing louder with each passing second. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out all other sounds. My fear twisted in my gut, threatening to consume me, but I pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. In that moment, time seemed to slow once more. The world narrowed down to the imminent clash between humanity and the otherworldly threat. With a surge of adrenaline and unwavering determination, I raised my weapon, ready to fight for our survival. The battle had just begun, and for some reason I'm smack dab right in the middle. The Nebulax robots rushed towards me faster than I could blink. Then Tannis stepped in with his gun, keeping them back. He turned to me, a small smile on his face.
No such thing as aliens, eh, boss?
I chuckled, and so did he. He nodded to me.
You do what you need to do.
I nodded back. In the chaos of the fight, I managed to sneak Jerry into the mothership. The air was thick with the acrid stench of burning metal, and the distant echoes of explosions reverberating through the hull. My heart pounded in my chest as adrenaline coursed through my veins, fueling my determination to complete our mission. As we entered the dimly lit corridor, I turned to Jerry, urgency etched in every single line across my face. "We need to sweep the entire area for the key to the robots," I urged him, my voice barely audible over the clanging of metal and distant shouts of the enemy soldiers. "The controls!" Jerry nodded, his eyes filled with the strength that matched my own. We moved swiftly, cautiously, our senses heightened. This is a high-stakes operation, the highest I have ever gone. Humanity lost the day the Nebulax came. I would make sure we win today. Every footstep echoed loudly in the metallic confines, making my heart skip a beat with every sound. We searched every nook and cranny, peering into rooms cluttered with alien technology, but found no sign of the controls. Frustration gnawed at me, mingling with the adrenaline that still surged through my veins. Sweat trickled down my forehead, mixing with the dirt and grime on my face. Finally, we reached the control hub, a room pulsating with colored lights and the hum of machinery. Jerry's eyes widened as he surveyed the array of screens and buttons, a hint of fascination glimmering in his gaze. "I know you're in love with the place, Jerry, but it needs to go. Destroy it," I commanded, my voice strained with the weight of our mission. "We can't risk them regaining control of the robots." Jerry hesitated, his fingers hovering over the controls.
"But Claire,"
he began, his voice filled with uncertainty.
"this computer could come in handy one day. Think of the information we could gather from it."
Anger surged within me, battling with the exhaustion and fear that threatened to overwhelm me. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. "This is not the time for sentimentality, Jerry," I snapped. "We can't afford to leave this in their hands. Destroy it!" His face twisted with stubborn defiance. Jerry crossed his arms, refusing to comply. Panic welled up inside me, the weight of our mission bearing down on my shoulders. I couldn't let his hesitation jeopardize everything we had fought for. Without another word, I launched myself at him, my fists connecting with his jaw. The impact reverberated through my knuckles, the pain mingling with a sense of vindication. Jerry stumbled backwards clumsily, his eyes wide with shock and betrayal, before collapsing to the ground in a crumpled heap. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. There was no time for remorse now. I approached the control hub, my hand trembling as I reached for a small device tucked into my utility belt. With practiced efficiency, I attached it to the console, ensuring a complete lockdown of the enemy's central command. As the device beeped, confirming the success of this task, I turned my attention to Jerry's unconscious body. Regret weighed heavily on my chest, but I knew I had made the right choice. I couldn't let sentimentality cloud my judgment. I dragged him away from the control hub, his body leaving a trail in the dusty corridor. The sounds of battle raged on the outside, distant, but a constant reminder of the dangers that still lurked. I glanced back at the control hub one last time, the pulsating lights casting an eerie glow on the walls. This sacrifice would not be in vain. Taking a deep breath, I hoisted Jerry over my shoulder and made my way towards the rendezvous point. The echoes of my footsteps faded into the chaos, each stride carrying me farther from the control hub. As we disappeared into the shadows of the mothership, determination burned bright within me. We had achieved a victory today, even if it came at a personal cost. And as the weight of Jerry's unconscious body pressed against my back, it was time to go. The general would have sent the alert already. I ran out into the chaos. "Alrighty, folks, it's about time we got out of here." The squad and I packed up and ran for our lives. The adrenaline surged through my veins as we sprinted through the streets, leaving the dark, claustrophobic tunnels behind, and the robots coming right after. I counted the seconds as my heart pounded in my chest, a steady rhythm echoing the urgency in my mind. And when the boom shook the world, I stopped running. Earth 1, Nebulax 0. I could taste the acrid smoke in the air, a bitter reminder of the destruction that had unfolded around us. I glanced over my shoulder, relieved to see the Nebulax robots no longer chasing after us. The once relentless pursuers had just stopped, as the mothership erupted into flames, an inferno of chaos. "Sit down, everyone," I called out, my voice strained yet resolute. "We need to take a moment and celebrate." My squad, weary but triumphant, collapsed onto the pavement. Celeste and Tanner produced a couple of beers that they had saved for this very occasion. The sound of their bottles clinking together cut through the tense silence, filling the air with feelings of camaraderie and relief. I lowered myself to the ground, the rough texture of the asphalt scratching against my palms. The cool evening breeze danced through the streets, carrying away the smoke and leaving behind the subtle sense of calm. I took a deep breath, savoring the sweet scent of victory, mingling with the lingering odor of destruction. Just as I began to relax, a faint groan caught my attention. Jerry. His eyes flashed open, filled with an unmistakable rage. I watched his face contort, his lips twisting into a snarl as he struggled to speak through the pain.
You fool!
Jerry's voice quivered, with a mixture of anger and desperation.
Blowing up that mothership! It was the worst mistake you could have made! We could have used the tech to at least find a way to stop the rest!
Confusion clouded my thoughts, and I opened my mouth to question his words. But before I could form the words, a sound shook the very core of my being. A tremendous sonic boom thundered through the sky, drowning out any further protest. The ground beneath us trembled, the vibrations resonating through my body like an electric shock. The world seemed to slow down, each passing moment stretching into eternity. My eyes rose to the heavens, and the blood drained from my face. A fleet of colossal ships emerged from the clouds, darkening the sky with their ominous presence. They loomed above us, vast and unyielding, like a harbinger of our doom. One ship after another materialized, spreading across the horizon, until the once rowdy celebrations of my squad were silenced. The air grew heavy, suffocating under the weight of fear. This is it. I truly messed up. This was not a battle we could win. This is the real day humanity lost, and I was the architect of our downfall. A whisper escaped my trembling lips, barely audible above the deafening silence that surrounded us. This is all my fault. I stared into the eyes of my squad, my hands trembling, realizing the magnitude of my failure. The world had shifted beneath our feet, and there was no escape from the impending darkness. Regret and guilt swirled within me, drowning out any trace of hope that remained. In that moment, as the ships descended upon us, like vultures descending upon their prey, I gulped, and the Nebulax landed. Hey sci-fi horror fans, it's Kira Rhodes. Thanks to all the VAs who helped with the production of this video. And thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Craving for another scary story? Click that video on your screen. Until next time everyone, and remember, stay cosmic.